So I'm going to ask you all to play a little game with me. It's a little poll. I'm going to ask you to talk about your own level of empathy. And the question I'm going to ask you, and Sarah Jane is going to put this up for me, which is, how empathic do you consider yourself to be in general? Well above average, average, below average, well below average. So if you could all just pop in quickly this poll, and Sarah, you're going to know how
I am. I'm seeing
the answers are.
In. There. Okay.
I want 100% of our interactions here. Come on.
93%. One of you is
not bad. War.
Well done. Okay. End poll.
You're going to bring out my Johnny Cash if you want to go with 100%.
So, I think the most answer was actually average.
All right. Can you show the answers for us? There we go.
There we are. And well above average is 3.
Right. Well, that's very interesting score. So the average is the winner, which of course at the end of the day is absolutely supposed to be. So spot on. Well done, everybody. So 19% for well above average, 31% for above average. Does anyone have any comment with regard to that particular score? Does it say anything to you guys?
It's probably indicative of the fact that most of the etchers on this call work within customer service, and we have some wonderful hospitality clients which will be woven into their very purpose and being, I am quite sure. So that doesn't surprise me that we're average and higher in the higher end of that poll.
Right. On balance, what is you're suggesting is that you're above average as a group. I mean, on balance, if you take the average. Well, I've done this survey now with 1,000 people, and this is how it scores across 1,000. So you're, let's say, more average than the grand scheme of things. But one of the biggest challenges I think that this slide seems to indicate is that oftentimes one has a higher regard for one's empathy. So we think we're empathic, but we're not necessarily being received as empathic. And this is a key consideration, because in the end of the day, what counts at some level is how truly empathic you are. And one of the issues we have when we are running businesses is that we sometimes get distracted or pulled away from being at the coalface, and we don't actually have a good understanding, the right data actually, about whether our employees and then our customers are feeling fully heard. So empathy is a really powerful tool. You know, it's something that can be fantastic, as I was expressing, in so many different ways, but it can also be used for manipulative purposes and has other less positive usages. And so it depends on what your intention is with regard to it. But what empathy isn't feeling sorry for somebody else. That's called sympathy. It's not necessarily the action that you take once you've been empathic. So the real focus is empathy is about understanding. It's not necessarily about taking action just yet, because if you've been properly empathic, then you are better suited to take an action, but you don't need necessarily to add compassion to it. They may not be looking for sympathy, may not be looking for compassion. It's also not necessarily about being nice. Some people think that empathy is all about the soft, gooey and always being lovely. It's not necessarily. It's just really about understanding what the other person is thinking, feeling, or experiencing. So I like to think of it as taking perspective. And for that, you need data. And this is the key one, is listening actively. We're going to get into that in a moment. Being present, understanding the other person's thoughts, emotions, and experiences, and ultimately about being fair, because you've got the right data points in the first place, and then being authentic, not necessarily nice. So what we're going to do now is a little experience, as Sarah just alerted you, and we're going to do an empathy circle. Has anyone done an empathy circle before? I don't see I didn't pop up the comments, so I can't see if anyone's commenting away about these things.
Not yet.
Oh, and Giles, hey there. Good to see you. So we're going to have then, you're all virgins to the empathy circle experience. That's a good thing. Nope. Thank you, Judy, for responding. So what is an empathy circle? An empathy circle is a structured dialogue where you will be taking turns to speak to one person that you've identified, and you're going to do intentional listening, where you're going to reformulate without judgment what you heard someone else say. So I might say something like, well, I think it's great that it's a sunny day. So Minter, what I hear you say, I think it's a lovely weather today. That's the reformulating without judgment, not using the same vocabulary, but you understand that I understand the notion of what you're saying, including the feelings that you may be having. At the end of, if I've spoken to, let's say, Sarah's reformulated back to me. And then at the end, I will say, thank you, Sarah, I feel heard. At that point, Sarah, to whom I was speaking, will then choose to speak to another person in the group. And that person then reformulates back to Sarah. At the end, Sarah says, okay, I feel heard, and go on around the group. You'll be put into groups of threes in a moment. So you can choose. You don't have to go around the circle, but that generally is how it goes, because we're only going to do this for 10 minutes. It's an executive empathy circle. Does anybody have a question?
No.
Pop on your... Everyone's good? All right. Well, that means the instructions were reasonably clear. So here's what we're going to do. You're going to go into groups of 3, and you're going to discuss this question using the empathy. So if you don't know each other, say, hi, my name is Minter Dial, and I'm an author. You're a quick introduction. And then so you're going to speak, and you're going to take turns. For 90 seconds, you're going to speak. So for 90 seconds, más o menos, sorry, try to keep a little bit of a time so everybody gets a chance, because that's important. And you're going to talk about, what does collaborative leadership mean for you? How can it help in your business? How can it help grow your business? So that's what you're going to do. Quick intro, and then someone starts, say I'll start off, and you start speaking about this question. And you need to write it down, because it's going to disappear when you go into the group. How does collaborative leadership, what does collaborative leadership mean for you? And how can it help grow your business? That's beautiful.
I'm just going to pop it
doing that down. Very smart, very smart. All right. Now, Sarah, unless there are any other questions, you're going to pop into your little groups.
Yeah, we have got 4 breakout rooms with 3 people in. We will be there for around 10 minutes, and then you'll be brought back into the main room. So I'm going to do that now. It's automatically assigned. Be nice, play nice.
Right. So what I'd like to do is ask you guys, we're in 4 rooms. I know there's a group 1 of 2, but most of us were 3s. What did anybody come up with? What were some of the themes or thoughts that came out with regard to what does collaborative leadership mean for you, and how can it help? Anyone like to share? You can put either in the comments if you feel shy, but don't hesitate to put on your microphone and give us something that came out from your group.
I guess I could feedback from myself and Judy. Judy had a lot of interesting opinions, which I thought were very good.
Thank you.
So we talked about a couple of things. One of the first points we raised was about listening to kind of all your teams, or all the people in the teams that you work with as well, and about how that's difficult to balance in terms of listening to all the different perspectives and opinions, and I guess trying to coalesce them around one common goal. And we also talked about trust, kind of related to that. So having trust in others, kind of onboarding them to a collective vision. So there's a vision that everyone's going in the same direction, and then you have the trust to let them execute on that, and to, lead aspects of it themselves without, your direct leadership over every individual thing. And then one last thing that she said that I think is interesting was about how it's fundamental to be collaborative, but you also have to know when to stop. Like, there are times perhaps when you have to take the reins back a little bit and say, sometimes collaboration is a powerful tool for generating ideas, or for, breaking outside of the confines of what you've currently been doing. But there are times maybe when you have to say, this task now doesn't need the entire team. It needs a smaller group, or it needs to be just one person, or whatever it is. And they were the things that we noted down. I took some notes.
Yeah. So you said one is it's a difficult task to listen to everybody, and then to get some sort of unity around that, because you want to, of course, drive the vision as well, and yet bring all the inputs in and sort of make that feel fair and square. And then sometimes you also just can't spend your time collaborating. You actually need to do stuff, and you need to execute. Would that be fair?
Yeah, I think so. And Judy, feel free to speak up if you think I've misrepresented you in any way.
Not at all. That was so clear, Adam. Thank you. Yes, exactly that, Minter.
Brilliant. All right. Anyone else have something else that came out of their group that they'd like to share?
So Shelley's just popped in here and I'll speak on her behalf. I heard we need to know who is in the room to be free to collaborate. This is how some folks may feel. We need to create a feeling of safety.
Right. So that's interesting because that kind of bounces off what Adam was talking about with this notion of trust as well. If you know who's there and if you can trust them, then it feels like you're going to get a better collaboration. If you don't even know they're there, how do you trust them kind of feeling? Is that a fair wrap up?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's it was interesting because that wasn't directly said, but that's what I heard.
Huh.
And so I think it's that feeling of, do I really have the license to collaborate? Am I really on an equal playing field? And that, I think there needs to be intentional effort to create that environment, to create that safety.
Right. So everyone feels like they are allowed to collaborate, where they have a voice that's hearable and is at an equal weighting.
Can I ask a question on that?
Yeah, please do. Yeah.
Is it the environment that you have to generate? Or, I mean, a perspective could be that actually it's not the individuals in the room, but the environment of that room, because you've got a cast of thousands. Surely you're not going to be able to know all of the people who are in that room. But if it's if you're invited to speak, or you feel that other people are speaking up and talking in the same sort of level and contributing in the same sort of way that you feel you could as well, then maybe you'd want to speak. So again, it's almost that environment you've got to generate rather than the attendees of that particular session, meeting, whichever, from my perspective.
Yeah, so context is key. If you've got 1,000 people, you don't know everybody, you don't feel safe, then you're maybe less willing to participate and contribute wholly.
Yes, agreed.
Cool, thank you, Fee. So we had anyone else have like to add what their room came about? Sorry, I don't want to cut off anybody.
I can add quickly. I had
Please.
A really interesting chat with Seth and Heidi, and a couple of there were lots of things. We were all on a very similar page, but we picked up on the culture piece as well, about creating a culture where people feel genuinely empowered to collaborate, and also, the importance of that for a business where people feel free to contribute, to experiment, to make mistakes, and to make decisions, and for it not to be a traditional company structure where there's a singular person who ultimately makes the decisions, and that can often be the benefit if you can create a culture where people feel able to do that in a sort of safe way. And then related to the exercise itself, what was fascinating was knowing that you had to play back what the other person was saying made you listen a lot harder. My natural inclination was, when Seth started talking, to start thinking about what I was going to say or to solutionize. And instead, because I knew I was going to have to play it back to him, I had to stop myself from doing that and actually listen to what Seth was saying, which was, was fascinating.
Really appreciate that, Callum, the extra insight there. So the first point you were saying was talking about the notion of the culture piece, and you need to create an environment where there's a safe environment where people are able to participate and contribute. And so that's about not being so hierarchical and as I was understanding it, and allowing sort of the leadership, everybody to lead, if you will, at some level. And then you were talking about how when you were in this, you were listening, but then all of a sudden you caught yourself wanting to jump in, if you will, or what were you going to say as opposed to what he was saying.
Exactly.
Thank you, Callum, very much. And did anybody else, because this is what I would like to have, anyone else have an experience like this or different with regard to the practice of this listening, forgetting the topic itself, but just this notion of the empathy circle? Anybody else have any experiences?
I completely concur with what Callum just said. Is exactly that. So that's spot on. Absolutely. Yeah. You have to pay far more attention as to what the person's saying when you're having to repeat it back in your own words and interpret it in your own way, rather than trying to think about what you're going to say next, as it were.
And is this something that would be useful for you in your day-to-day business, do you think?
Absolutely. I think with the likelihood of, I mean, again, in experience, and we just had it there, actually, classic example. I responded, but somebody else did at the same time. I think that in this remote environment where you've got people trying to respond to questions, you may get 2 or 3 people trying to respond. You never get that in the same room because you'd see that somebody was trying to or intended to speak. So I think there's mechanisms and methods that we could enlist. Specifically, it's the one you've just described and illustrated. People have to think about what you're saying, because I think a lot of the time people are thinking about what next to say rather than what's actually being said.
100%, yes. I completely agree with that.
I think that's the be present bit as well, isn't it?
Mm.
And it's hard to do sometimes. Anybody else like to pop in that hasn't spoken? Because there are plenty of other names I see.
There are. Can I just prompt Dan? You've just dropped into the chat to build on what was said about the environment and context. Shelley communicated the importance of explicitly removing the barriers to empower everyone to be able to challenge the status quo. It kind of goes back to the safety question, doesn't it, Winter? Having the right environment, the right culture, and the trust are all part of that collaborative way of working together. Actively is the big part of that.
As Adam was saying, I tend to this idea, or no, sorry, it was Callum, I can't remember. Sorry, it's talking about the hierarchy story, and there's this notion of that we always at the top have to give the direction and punch it in, like this is and be the energizer, the leader of that. So, but sometimes if you think of yourself as being just within and facilitating, creating that culture that can help the other people want to participate and feel welcome in, as opposed to waiting for me as the leader to direct and impose the decision making. But as Adam did say, you also have to make decisions. So it's a balance. So anyone else have any last comments? I just want to say a few more words and then pass back on the baton, as they say. Is anyone else? I haven't had a chance to read your comment, Judy. I'll do that in a moment. So I'm just going to flip on because in the end of the day, we talked about creating a culture. So it's perfect, conduit for me. I like to think of this idea of building a culture of empathy in your organization. But this isn't a new thing. And here's the challenge. In fact, 87% of CEOs in a survey by Business Solver say that there's a direct link between workplace empathy and business performance, productivity, employee retention, and general business health. So, I mean, it sounds like there's basically no bad thing to empathy, right? So, and it seems like everybody understands it. 87% of CEOs get it. What's the problem?
They don't always employ it.
Exactly. You say to do it, but do you do it? And it's not an uncommon problem, especially when we're talking about change, culture. It's a much harder thing to do than actually to say to do. We all hire lots of wonderful consultants to tell us what to do, but then it doesn't necessarily happen. So why the resistance? Oops, sorry, so there are several pieces of resistance. First is there are misconceptions as to what is empathy. Some people think of empathy as being weak, being vulnerable. And it goes to this idea of showing if you're a leader and you have the humility to say, I actually don't know everything. We have to get off this idea of know it all and learn it all and ask for help. And it makes people feel better about themselves when they know that they're contributing, they're helping you. So it's not at all a sign of weakness, but that's the perception people have. So also people think, oh, well, emotions, we shouldn't have emotions at work. They have no place at work. That's a thing for the home. But that's also a misconception because we all, 100% all operate through our emotions as a first port of call. The fourth, and this is a very practical reality, is that stress and speed are where we are always stressed to perform, where we don't have the time, a little bit to Adam's point, don't have the time to listen, because it takes time to listen. And as soon as we feel stressed, we go into our little bit more amygdala, fight and flight, our old typical habits, and we forget that it takes this mind space to be present, to listen. And I don't have the time. Chop, 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 chop. But that's another issue. And the final one is, I call it the rich man's malady. And it's fairly pointed at me. Not that I'm rich, but it's definitely successful men who have a particular problem with it. And where lots of studies show how if you're successful, you feel like there's absolutely no reason to change. Look, I prefer 30 years I've been doing a fantastic job. I just got to continue doing that. So that's the issue with the rich, if you will, the successful person. And men in general do not, or are oftentimes more empathically challenged than women. That's a fact in research. So another point is that sometimes empathy is difficult or is different to exercise according to where you're doing it. If you're doing it at home, if you're doing it at work, with complete strangers, you've thought about that time you're on an airplane back in those days. We took airplanes, they're the flying objects, where we would sit beside somebody and total stranger. Oh, so hi, who are you? My name is Minter. And you have this conversation and it's deep and powerful, like you haven't had with a real friend in a long time. Don't know if anyone have had that experience. Anyway, and then a lot of people say it's no difference, but reality is it is different. At home, we have a thing called the close communication bias, which, oh, I know what you're saying. I cut you off already. I've been with you for 20 years. How can I not know what you're feeling? And that happens at work too. If you've been working with somebody for 10, 15 years, you kind of think you know what they're thinking and feeling. And that can be very aggravating. I don't know if you've ever experienced that, when someone cuts you off and it's not at all what you were thinking or feeling. Has anyone had that experience?
Yeah, I'm very good at it, actually.
Thank you for being honest. But so certainly there are 13% that say it's easier to be empathic at work, and that's great. But I would caution against thinking it's the same everywhere. It's difficult, and you can't be empathic everybody all the time everywhere. So it needs intentionality. I think someone used that word before. You need to have intentionality with regard to your exercising empathy, and make sure you're not just focused on your external facing of empathy, but also think of it as a cultural inside out. You operate with empathy with the people you're working with. I'm going to finish with a little video from my favorite rock and roll band, because that's what I like to do. This is a band that had 7 musicians. Each musician came from a different musical heritage. And so the complete diversity, even if they were all men, basically, but the idea is they came from a different musical background. And the only way to have diversity work is if you know how to listen.
That's how the Grateful Dead evolved as they did, was because everybody listened really hard to each other. That's the only way it can happen. You have to listen. You have to listen.
I finished with that, Sarah. The floor is back to you.
Thank you very much, Minter. We will come back to Minter in a bit when we've gone through our Q&A. I've got some burning questions I want to ask you about your book that you have written that I've just dipped into while we were putting this all together. But I'm going to hand over now to Seth. Seth, for those of you who don't know, sits on the leadership team at Etch. He's our head of innovation and has recently been delving into both sustainability and purpose as part of his role within the leadership team, and is helping to shape that across the whole business. Seth is going to talk to you around some things that I didn't even know existed. VUCA, a new VUCA. Am I saying that right, Seth?
That sounds good.
It's a new acronym. So we are all going to learn. Every day is a school day. A new acronym today. Seth, over to you.
Thank you very much. I'm in such a reflective mode now, but I'm going to change it up a little bit and talk a little bit about, this thing VUCA, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous is the acronym. But I'm also going to talk about the application of systemic design, which is an approach that's being used to kind of tackle complex problems as we move into a world of increasing complexity. And I'm going to look at collaboration from a perspective of, we will start with the individual and kind of the problem space and what incoming problems do I have, but then we'll look at from a more of an ecosystem perspective and thinking beyond the boundaries of an organization. And then I'll take a slice of how you can look at an ecosystem, and I'll just talk about corporate partnerships with startups, just as one example in the time we have. And then I'll talk a little bit about the Etch model for addressing that and how we've used some of these approaches on ourselves and for our own kind of evolutionary purpose. So if I start with the kind of problem space in this kind of volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous kind of environment that's happened, you know, after COVID and the economic impact of it, the social difficulties that have happened. So as leaders, we can kind of get used to problem solving habits and patterns and things that we've developed, which are kind of in our comfort zone. But in this kind of increasing complexity, there are a number of different types of problems, and the nature of those problems is worth being aware of, so that we can help ourselves and help others with how to tackle these problems. And there's a guy called Dave Snowden, has a framework some of you might know called Kinefin. Strange word, but essentially there are these 4 different types of problems or kind of situations that rely on different ways of solving them, different ways of approaching them. I'll just go through those. So at the start, you've got kind of very ordered and predictable, obvious problems and systems. So this is where, you know, cause and effect is well established. There is best practice. You pretty much know that if I put these inputs in, I'm going to get this output. You know, it's well verified, valid and reliable. So this is in the easy kind of quadrant. Then you have kind of complicated problems. So these are like hard problems to solve, need specific domain expertise. Rather than best practice, it's more about good practice, because there might be slightly different theories of how to tackle these problems. They are predictable, but you know, it's complex. So something like getting people to the moon is an example of something of a complicated problem. Then you have moving into the kind of less predictable half. You have complex problems. This complexity idea, just very unpredictable. You know, it's hard to associate cause and effect. And you can think of a leadership culture or an organizational culture, or culture at large, or parenting, for example, as this kind of complex situation where it's hard to predict with the same inputs that you'll get the same outputs. One way of thinking about it is, so if an aeroplane like a Boeing 747 is a complicated system, millions and millions of parts, but you can map everything out and it's quite easy to predict you know, what changing one part will do. Whereas if you have something like a bowl of spaghetti, this is a complex system. Even though it just has a few dozen parts, it's hard to actually predict what will happen when you pull at the end of a strand of spaghetti that sticks out of the bowl. So you've got these different areas, and finally you actually have chaotic problems, which I won't go into too much today, but that's where you're really there is no cause and effect, and you need to kind of act slowly and de-risk as you go. But moving into this idea of systemic design. So if we're moving into an environment and we feel that we're in an increasingly kind of complex, ambiguous world, what tools do we have that can help us tackle these like complex problems? And systems theory and a kind of growing area of systemic design, combining design thinking and systems theory, I'll talk about for a moment. So when we think of systems, the first thing to come to mind might be computers, or it might be management systems. This area is not really about that. It's more about something, the kind of complexity of a family, for example. If you think about what it's like having relationships with others in your family, and you might have certain feelings, thoughts, actions, but what you intended to happen doesn't always happen, and there are kind of unintended consequences, and it's a deeply complex multi-generational system. Widening it out, as I said, organizational culture, communities that different people and organizations are part of, a supply chain within a business, and then ecosystems, either in the natural world or kind of looking at organizations and interconnections as ecosystems. These are all complex systems. And increasingly, as businesses are kind of grappling with this, and there's a kind of move towards more purposeful direction for organizations, we're trying to tackle kind of greater, or at least pin organizational direction to systemic issues and things that we want to try to help solve. And this is important, for the business, for the employees, for the community, for the natural world. Things like poverty, inclusion, wealth, pollution, etc. These are examples of big kind of macro systemic issues. And underneath it, I suppose, we have this ongoing current of like what's called the fourth industrial revolution. So we have these kind of step changes in terms of the amount of data, the amount of processing power, our digital and physical networks, and we have capabilities like the Internet of Things, like artificial intelligence, like blockchain. So these can be, enablers. But I guess, what I wanted to talk about here is just thinking in systems starts to move us from a linear kind of way of thinking about inputs and outputs, and more towards the interconnections, and thinking more in terms of, perhaps things like circular economy and circularity, and thinking about what other capitals are at play beyond financial capital. So things like social capital, human capital, natural capital, and to start to think about all these things together, and what impact and leverage points we can actually make as an organization in moving into the future, that connects with purpose. So very top line about kind of thinking about things in a systems approach. I wanted to take an example of corporate partnerships, and how kind of collaborations can work. There are other types of collaborations across beyond the boundaries of organizations, with obviously with customers, with suppliers, with NGOs, with governments, with communities. But if we look at startups, startups often want to partner when they do with corporates, not really because of financial investment, but often because of access to markets, access to customer data and to customers, and corporations might want to partner with startups in order to innovate more quickly. And we see huge growth in these kind of corporate venture capital investments, over the past 10 years or so, but not so many are satisfied. So there's still, I think in a McKinsey study, about 28% are satisfied with these relationships. So what are the issues? Things like clashes of ways of working when trying to work with an external startup, the slowness of the corporation, maybe the trouble of adapting quickly. Lack of strategic buy-in is another one. So it could be seen as a kind of side project and not something that's really going to help advance the organization. Whereas the opportunities are things like having this systemic picture and understanding where you might need to play next, and actually aligning on that and what your purpose is with a startup, understanding what the target segments that you aren't addressing today, but they might be able to help you address could be, understanding, what the actual ecosystem of potential partnerships could be. So understanding the assets and capabilities that would be needed that you don't have in the target space. So these are the kind of things that can, turn into a fruitful collaboration with an external startup or party. And in Etch, we have a kind of process that we go through for this. We call it the disruptive blind spot analysis. And it's a way for us to think about the system now that we operate in and our ecosystem, and look at the potential for change and different potential futures, and to map out all the different, a couple of different scenarios, let's say, and the different stakeholders that we could engage with, and to try to understand what the potential for change is, in the next few years, for example, and start to do some deep research and understand these different groups. Could be users, could be experts, could be other businesses, and from there try to look at what kind of changes do we think are coming, and how could we and what's the impact of those, and how could we actually prioritize different types of collaboration in order for us to try to plan for and address and learn in these new spaces of change. And at Etch, we've kind of done that on ourselves, and we do that with our partner clients as well. But in Etch, for example, this has led us to think about, what does our talent intelligence kind of platform look like? How can we actually quantify an ecosystem? And we work with a partner to provide that kind of data to us. How can we deliver AI and ML type services in a flexible way for our clients? And what does our kind of bench look like, and what's our kind of virtual bench look like, which Shelly will go into in a bit more detail. But yeah, that's a bit of an overview on thinking about things in a kind of ecosystem way, and some of the applications from our perspective and my perspective.
Thank you, Seth. I've got a couple of questions for you. They're not easy. I'm going to tax these ones. So VUCA is a new concept for me. Let's go over it. That's volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous. And it feels like through the last year or so, we've had to deal with these set of challenges. They've been thrown at us very, very quickly. How do leaders now, we are beginning to settle, but there will still be uncertainty and ambiguity ahead. How do we prevent the threat of that uncertainty? Do you think using collaboration, using leadership to stop or adversely affect the mental well-being of our employees and those around us, that then could lead to jeopardizing business growth? That's a big meaty question, but a quick answer would be great.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's good to just bring it back to the personal, and the challenge with system thinking is that it can get lost within it. But I think the truth is that it's been a really hard time, and everyone has started to look at things in a slightly different way because of the massive shocks that have happened over since the pandemic started. But people, it is uncertain, and people are worn out, and sometimes our kind of reserves are depleted as well, and that can be really disorienting, personally, professionally. There is a special forces tactic, I think, that if you think of an organization that gets put into completely uncertain times often, how do you actually act when everything's completely uncertain? And really this connects to just doing the next right thing, and relinquishing control, I think, a little bit actually. But to do that, I think this is framed by having a clear purpose, and understanding that if it's clear enough, then the potential for being able to just do the next right thing that's anchored to your purpose is going to help you stay on track. And I think someone said wishful thinking is the enemy. So actually just taking action, and also looking for evidence, I'd say, and accepting, asking people, and as a leader being vulnerable and saying, I want to know what's actually happening, and accepting it. So a bit of humility in there as well, going back to Minta's point.
Thank you, Seth. I think we're going to switch over to Shelly now. I'm conscious of the time. Make sure Shelly has her airtime too. So Shelly, I know firsthand from working with you over the last few years, it's multiple years now, that you have championed collaboration in many different ways over the years, and a passion of yours is also purpose. You have championed a new way of working for collaboration, and it's over to you to describe how you've managed to manifest that dream over the last year's effort. Over to you.
Yeah, I mean, it's something I constantly think about and constantly challenge the way we're working. So I think my part of today's talk is to just give you a tangible example of what we've actually done with all of these discussions and these thoughts to actually produce a piece of innovation that actually stimulates collaboration. But just to pitch the context, so in the last Fireside chat, I spoke specifically on the emerging labour force. And the pandemic and remote working is only just the start. The disruption in the labour market is just huge. both in robotic labor and also human-based labor, but not just in that spectrum. It's also the ways of working are hugely coming under pressure, because this historical way of company employ staff or company employ suppliers is hugely coming under challenge of needing to look at this in a different way, because it doesn't create the same level of collaboration that you need to stimulate innovation to keep up with the demands of the market. And overlaid on that is the variety of attempts that are out there at the moment. I mean, there's just millions of startups of people just trying to solve multiple problems. And overlaid on that is the extent of the numerous technology stacks that are now out there. So it is impossible that you can actually run a company or be a leader in a company where you know everything of everything like you used to, 50 years ago. So collaboration is not just a nice idea, and innovation is not just something nice to do in the company. It is absolutely essential to start readdressing how we lead our teams, and we have to break down the stereotypical way of how we use resources both internally and externally to deliver your projects, both our clients and ourselves. So that's the context of why we got to work this last year on this piece of innovation. And for us, our problem was our resources, both internally and contractors. So we have been using contractors for years, and we really enjoy our contractor relationship. We've got some great contractors that work in and out of Etch all the time, but there was always a barrier for where each party can go, because you still have your own autonomy. And until you hooked it all together in a new operating system, we were facing challenges over and over again. So we set on a plan to find a new way of working with our contractors, because you get such superior skills through contractors. And that's not to say you don't have them internally. You have them internally as well. But there was a huge shift over the last several years where very high-end skills were switching into contractor self-employment, and that and they were enjoying the benefit of that because the demand outstripped the supply in the marketplace. But it made it a huge challenge for companies to maintain the connection with those A-level players. So and then in addition to that, we also restructured and are very intentional to deliver 50% of our turnover using contractors. So we set on this piece of innovation and this project work, which took about a year, and we launched it about 3 weeks ago. And I will show you the teaser video, and then I will speak you through the journey that we went through. So if I just share my screen. So this is the piece of innovation is called, you can find it on bigradical.com. And here is the teaser video that we launched about 3 weeks ago. Sorry, let me just restart it from the beginning. So that is the teaser video, and it is intentional to, hold on, let me just make my screen a bit bigger. It's intentional to create the element of intrigue, because what we are trying to achieve is to find the right individuals that we would like to invite to partner with us. And by partner, I mean a legal partnership. So there's lots of terminology out there of partnership collaboration, but this is going one step further, and this is actually legally connecting contractors into a legal partnership from which they will operate. The motivation, there's multiple motivations behind it. One of the large challenges that we had, which also stimulated a new motivation, was the I-35 rules that were coming out this year, April. Now, they were supposed to come out last year, and then we hit the pandemic, and Rishi Sunak pushed them for a year, and they came out in April this year. Now, I-35 is a tax regime that was brought up by HMRC in the public sector several years ago, and then the private sector has hit now in April. But so we needed to protect our contractors, because the stats were coming through that 46% of contractors in self-employment now will switch back to employment, which means for us who have structured our ecosystem to deliver through contractors, that was a huge threat for us. So we needed to protect our contractors, and we needed to protect us. But this is also on the bedrock of years of very strong relationships with our contractors, where we've plugged them right into Etch as an extension of our permanent staff. And we've gone through huge efforts over the years to make no differentiation between contractors and employed staff. But like I said, it's we wanted to go one step further to create an environment that that tears down the historical ways of company using contractors in a supplier relationship. To everybody has a stake in this, and everybody partakes. So you pool clients and you stimulate collective intelligence. And the reason we want to be so intentional about who we take is because we're looking for A players, very high-end A players. How we've structured this is to create a legal partnership. By invitation only, contractors will join us. They will continue to have their own autonomy and also be part of a new operating system where we all can go to market together with one brand ultimately, as well as your own brand in your personal limited company. So what we've been trying to create is a win-win, where you can continue to do what you did in running your own limited company. But as we began to research the contractors, we found that the motivations for contractors to go self-employed is they love the autonomy, they love being their own destiny of their own path, they love being their own boss. But the things that they really miss is being part of a common shared purpose, and also working with other A players. So what we've done here to create this new partnership, basically create one new operating model, is to solve the bits that they're missing. So to allow these contractors to work together with one common purpose, to allow them to be stimulated to work with other A players. And Big Radical essentially is an environment to stimulate the interconnected relationships, and then the algorithms work in the background to maintain the risk and reward ratio that you still find when you're self-employed, but you get to enjoy all the benefits of that you find being employed. So it's a massive attempt to find that hybrid middle ground, enjoying both benefits of both worlds, but doing it together. The beauty of this is that where I sit, for the last several years, I've been looking in the market going, isn't it crazy that we've got all these contractors, and even added to that, we've got thousands and thousands of small companies, 1 to 5 members, and we're all vying for the same turf, which is just crazy. And I just think there's got to be a new way of doing this. But you've got to come together to do it. And it can't just be a networking event, and it can't just be a happy feeling of relationships. You actually need to structure the legal environment to create the right behaviors through the right algorithms and financial setup. So that's what Big Radical is. So we launched it about 3 weeks ago. Like I said, we're operating with a scarcity model intentionally to find the right individuals, to make sure they're aligned to our purposes and the ways of working. But it's really landed well, because I know from my own experience, being self-employed, it's a lonely world out there, and you land up doing the things that you don't want to do, like statutory accounts and you know, sorting out your admin and all those things. And when you come together, we can provide all of those services as an added benefit and allow these contractors to just do their very best work and the thing that they actually are made to do. And if we create that right high performing team, like an Ocean's 11 environment where you can get the projects in, put the right team together, which means you don't actually have to use your staff just because they are payroll. You use the right staff because they are the right people for the project. We will land up delivering better projects and products for our clients. So that is the aim. But to do that, we have had to go way beyond just the talk of collaboration. We're actually going to deliver with a brand new operating system. And the reason it's called Big Radical is because it is radically different.
Thank you, Shelley. We don't have many minutes left, just got 4, but I want to squeeze out a final question to each of our panelists today. I'd like to end with Minter, because this is stimulated from his book. I think you should have the last word. Just so you know, anyone who is on the call today who would like a copy of Minter's book, it's called You Lead, it's on Amazon. If you just send me a message, we will arrange a copy to be sent out to you, either on audiobook, on Kindle, or via wonderful Amazon. So the question that I have is about being a North Star and being your own true self and being authentic as a leader. And this question first to Seth. We've talked a lot about purpose, and we've talked about authenticity as a leadership team at Etch many times. Your North Star, how does that fit into a leadership team when we're trying to collaborate, when you've got your individual North Stars? How can you pull it all together? Over to you, Seth. That's a real toughie. And here's the curveball at the end.
Well, no, thank you for that. I'd love to hear what Minter has to say about it. I think thinking about your own purpose, you know, is the start, because how do you know if you're aligned to an organization's purpose and goals if you haven't explored what it is that you're looking for and what's important to you? And I think, you know, it's never a finished product. It's like, but it's, you know, as well as an evolutionary purpose, I think is something, you know, in a kind of teal sort of organizational zenith, you know, is something to go for. It's always a moving situation for an individual as well. So I just think, you know, there's a kind of dual track of like running, you know, what is important to you in your life and in your work and in your practice, and checking in on how that sizes up to the environment that you're in. And both are equally as important, and you need to connect the two.
Thank you. No, that makes sense. And Shelley, the same question to you. How do we connect our North Star in a leadership team with collaboration at the heart of it?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, the word collaboration, because it can actually be quite subjective. And people talk about collaboration, but all they're really meaning is a networking event or keeping engaged. Whereas I'm really fascinated with wrapping it up with purpose in, you know, why are we here? And is there a different way to do life, which includes your job, of which you spend 80% with colleagues that probably you don't know as well? You know, do we have to do the working environment like we do? But I think you have to start asking questions of purpose, your own, and am I aligned to the company's purpose? So all of those things are wrapped up in the same conversation. Otherwise, you won't have staying power, because there's no authenticity behind it. And you won't stimulate and challenge your own thinking if you're not truly wanting to explore a different way, because you are driven by a different purpose.
Lovely. Now, Minter, you've reflected. You're looking very reflective there.
Oh, and intensely listening. I liked what both Seth and Shelley said. So to try to add into the picture, I think, first of all, stop press. None of us knows each other, oneself perfectly. And in fact, most people suffer from the fact that they haven't had a strong, precise knowledge of who they are. And while it may still be evolutive, the real issue is actually doing some hard work, including accepting to embrace your less good sides your darker sides, your weaknesses. And it's only when you have that you're actually going to be true to yourself, and you can show up, be genuine, and think of your purpose. Once you've done that, in the collaborative space, the issue or the challenge is being brave enough to show all that. To say that I'm not great at this, or I have an issue here, at least being honest with yourself, because obviously I'm not going to tell you all that I'm an axe murderer, but showing the example, giving others the encouragement to actually do the work themselves, which sometimes might be giving them the time. It also could be informing them or instructing them how to find out more about who you are. And then the final part is making that connecting tissue between who you are and what you're doing at the company. And of course, you also have to have a strong, precise vision of what the company stands for. And then you need to do the work as a leader. Hey, this is me. I overlap with the mission of the purpose of the company this much. It doesn't have to be 100%. It never is, because you don't even know who you are 100%. So, and showing that this is what it is for me. And then do that storytelling, which will encourage others to find their connection, their connective tissue into the purpose of your organization. Then that's being collaborative.
Lovely. I'm just going to drop in a link to your book there, Minter. And as I said, if you'd like a copy of Minter's book, then do drop us a line, and we'll be sending out around the recording so you can reply to that email. Well, hopefully you've had an enjoyable hour and a half. I know it has absolutely whizzed through. Thank you very much to our panelists today, Seth and Shelly, and a big, massive thank you to Minter. That was absolutely smashing, thoroughly enjoyable. And hopefully we can have you back at Etch another time. I think there's more to come.
Good to see some nice smiles and nodding of heads.
Yes, nodding please. Thank you all very much, and we'll see you next time on the next Etch Fireside Chat. Thanks.
Thank you, Minter, so much.
My pleasure, Shelly.
Thanks, everyone.
Cheers, guys. Bye.
Bye.